Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Friday Reads video for March 29th, 2019. I'm going to hope to make this short and sweet. It is early on Friday morning, and in a couple of hours I am going to the Maryland Writers Association's annual conference. I'm so excited. It's my first time doing this. I'm hoping to have a lot of fun. Well, all of my desperate planning of the last couple of weeks to squeeze in my TBR has kind of come to naught. Like, for example, I had penciled in plans to read the Incendiaries before going to MWA, but that has not happened, so this is what I'll be taking with me today to read in off times during the conference, and I'm very excited to do so, to start this. This is a college-age novel about a couple of Korean Americans, and one of them gets involved in an extremist Christian organization, and another one was more involved in religion when he was younger, I believe, and it's about the tensions there and some broader tensions, I believe, when things go down due to the extremist nature of this organization. Anyway, I'm reading this right now in part to the fact that it's on the BookTube prize list. And this month I am reading books off of the Octofinals Group A list. And I will be comparing them in a video coming up in the next week or so. Also, the Incendiaries has made it past the Octofinals list and into the quarterfinals list, which Robert from Barter Hordes, who is organizing the BookTube prize, he just announced in a video which books made it to the next round. So it is very exciting that the book that I'm reading is still in the running, but I would have read it anyway. But yeah, it makes it all the more special, so I'm really hoping to enjoy this. Next, I am still slogging through Tender is the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald. At this point, I am hoping that I will finish it tonight once I get back from MWA. I have a little over 30 pages left, I think. I'm saying slogging because I've literally been losing sleep trying to finish this book in a nice amount of time to get to the rest of my reading, and I'm not enjoying it as much as I thought I would. I thought maybe this would be the Fitzgerald book, other than The Great Gatsby, that would really draw me in. This is the book he wrote significantly later than his other novels. It takes place on the Riviera and in Europe rather than in New York, and we have an older couple and their problems. He wrote it around the time that Zelda was admitted to a mental institution, and the wife in this book is also has some problems in that area, and her husband is a psychologist. But I'm finding I'm not being drawn in by the characters. I'm not being drawn in by the courtships and love affair stuff that Dick is having with Nicole, or with Rosemary, who is a much younger girl who he later meets and has an affair with. I'm not falling for the characters. I'm realizing, I think in retrospect, that I like The Beautiful and the Damned a little better in that respect, that the characters pop the most for me in that. Every now and then I get a little bit invested, especially as Dick and Nicole's marriage is falling apart. Some of the scenes I'm getting invested in, although it's all very disjointed. It feels like that we're just popping from place to place, and there's a lot of characters who I just don't seem to care about. I have been thinking about how different all of these other books are to The Great Gatsby, and what works for The Great Gatsby, in that it's short and concise and to the point. It's in first person, and Nick is less of a louse than a lot of the males in all of these other ones. So it's interesting, an interesting contrast, and I wonder if that has something to do with the fact that The Great Gatsby is so much better well known now than any of Fitzgerald's other works. I figured Tender is the Night is his next best known book. But it's not doing it for me. I mean, maybe I should try reading it again. I know that I'm staying up too late trying to read. I might be missing some things. It could be personal bias seeping in about, oh, this book. But that's where I am with it so far. The book I did finish from last week to this week is Day After Night by Anita Diamant, which I read for my book club, which met on Tuesday. And I thought it was an okay book, but not a great book. This is a book that takes place in October of 1945 in British Mandate Palestine, and we are following mostly a bunch of refugees from the Holocaust who are snuck in, and some of the rare refugees who the British let into the country, and we're following them into a displacement camp called Atlit. And our four leads are the ones who are sort of left there because they have no papers and they have no people to claim them, and so they're just sort of left in limbo. And it's a book without a lot of plot until the very end, and that's something that my book club really didn't like. And for me, I never care enough about plot. It just, it never really crosses my mind to care about it. But I was disappointed in, thematically, I think Diamant just skimmed the surface and didn't really go deep enough into what the girls were dealing with. And also, although in the last video I talked about liking that the girls were all from different backgrounds, I ultimately don't think that bore fruit, that even though they had different experiences in the Holocaust, they all kind of sounded the same, and it was hard to tell whose POV you were in a lot of the time. So that was the stuff that didn't work for me, and it made me think about the fact that since this is a lighter, that's a weird thing to say about a Holocaust book, but it's a book that skims the surface a lot less complexly than other literary fiction might. There's an act of violence at the end of the book that is really not explored in any complex way. It's really a book club book, which I guess is good because I read it with the book club, and it made me think about people's complaints about the plot, and it made me think, you know, for a book club book that isn't all that thematically rich or complex, or the characters aren't rich or complex, you really do need a plot. So that really does work against this book, and I think that probably is the weakest part of this book, because if Diamant is writing a book club book, it needs a hook, it needs a plot, and this just didn't have enough of one until the very end. So that's my thought. I mean, I still liked it. I think we all liked it, because mostly because we like the setting and the theme and the issues. I think sometimes I really liked some of the things that Diamant brought up, particularly about the tension between some of the survivors and the kibbutzniks, because there was this big philosophical difference, I guess, that remains a little bit in Israel. It's better now than it was, but the idea of survivor shame, and that the people in the camps were just lambs to the slaughter, and that they should have, you know, gotten up and fought, and that's what you know, the new Jews of the new state would do, and they wouldn't be victimized, and that to be a victim is to be horrible. And so there was a lot of shame in that, and obviously a lot of wrong-headed thinking about what you could do in the face of the Nazis and the Holocaust. So I liked that. We got into that a little bit, but not too deeply. But anyway, so all in all, it was an okay book. And finally, well, by this point, I'll be happy if I at least start this book by the end of the month. This is Sadness is a White Bird by Moriel Rothman-Zecher. This book I put on my list in part because it was a finalist for debut fiction in the National Jewish Book Awards, and so I wanted to cull a list for Jewish fiction and nonfiction this year, published in 2018, that I wanted to read this year, and this one had already been on my radar as a book that deals with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I will read from the flap. When Jonathan moves back to Israel at 17, he is eager to join the army and defend the Jewish state that his grandfather, a Salonican Jew whose community was wiped out by the Nazis, helped establish. But he is also conflicted about the possibility of having to monitor the occupied Palestinian territories, a concern that only grows more urgent when he meets Nimreen and Laith, the twin daughter and son of his mother's friend. From that winter morning, the three become inseparable, wandering the streets on weekends, piling onto buses toward new discoveries. They share joints on the beach, trading snippets of poems, intimate secrets, resentments, and dreams. Forced to confront the suffering of his Palestinian friends and their families under Israeli rule, Jonathan starts to question his deeply ingrained loyalties. As he is pulled in different directions, he grapples with what it means to be just one person in a violent historical struggle with so much at stake. And then that fateful day arrives, the one that lands Jonathan in prison and changes his relationship with the twins forever. Lyrical and searing, timely and powerful, Sadness is a White Bird is the story of one man's attempts to find a place for himself, discovering a beautiful, against-the-odds love that flickers like a candle in the darkness of a never-ending conflict. Oh, that's such a sad, depressing ending that seems so true. Never-ending conflict. So yeah, this one's going to be deep, hard-hitting. Actually, at the moment, I think right now, Rothman-Zecher is teaching an online class about writing political fiction, and I guess doing it with nuance. And I really kind of wanted to take the class, but I've already shelled out a lot of money for this conference, so I didn't know if I should shell out a bunch more for this class, but oh, it does sound very intriguing, the class and this book. I think it's going to challenge me, I think in ways that Day After Night didn't. And also, he did write a blog entry on the Jewish Book Council's website, and I think he is mostly a poet. This is his debut novel, and so like all poets, he talks a bit about how poetry figures into the book and figures into the title, so I'll link that down below as well. So that about covers it for me now. I hope next week for Friday Reads I'll be back to tell you that I made it through the rest of these books. And I will also be back at the end of this weekend to do my writing quarterly wrap-up video, where of course I will be talking a bit about my MWA conference experience, which will hopefully be great. So stay tuned. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.